This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 196 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is when your passport goes missing. So yeah, it's a collection of tales of when things go wrong. But I think it's important to point out that these kind of when things go wrong on our travels situations, they're probably based on, 0.0001% of our travel time. But they do take up a large proportion of our interest. People always like these episodes of things going wrong. But I do think that listening to them is a good reminder that things can go wrong and sometimes do go wrong, but we learn something from them or we have a good story to tell later. They're always entertaining stories. And if you think about the stories that you retell often from your travels, often they'll be from things that go wrong, but we actually don't think of them in such a negative way once they've been resolved. So today's kind of incidents are all related to when your passport goes missing. Now, I am happy to report that I have never misplaced or had stolen or anything happened to my passport while I was travelling. The only time I've lost my passport once was at home, and it was not long before I moved to Japan, so, nearly 20 years ago now, but I was about to move to Japan and I needed my passport to get the working visa put into the passport, and turned the house upside down and could not find my passport. And I finally declared it lost. Time was running out, ordered a new passport, got the visa, all sorted. And you can probably guess how this story ends, of course. Packing up the house, ready to move to Japan. What do I find? My old, now useless passport. It was in a handbag. I'd had to take it to work, I realised later, to a new job where I had to kind of provide some proper identification in order to get paid or something. And I tucked it into this very special secret pocket of a handbag that I didn't use very often, and I found it. But it was useless by then. So anyway, needless to say, ever since then, because I was so annoyed at having to pay an extra fee for it, I have never, ever lost track of my passport. In fact, this year I may not get the chance to use it again, but I know exactly where it is, and sometimes I even pull it out and just have a little look at it and look at the stamps that are in there and, reminisce about the good old days when we could travel easily. So, that's my passport. Anyway, in today's episode, I have 3 guests who have had incidents involving their passport, and sometimes more than their passport, going missing. And the first guest is Paula Morgan, who had this incident a while back on a trip in Europe.
My husband is someone who never forgets anything, never loses anything. He's just like the perfect traveller. He's really super organised. He speaks 5 languages, and he's just, just never makes mistakes. So we were in that big epic trip we took with our child for 3 months. We took a night express from Munich to Amsterdam, and we upgraded to a private, the most expensive room, because we just wanted to have a really good night's sleep. And we had our sparkling clean room and, the really efficient German service. And about 5 hours out of Amsterdam early in the morning, our train broke down.
Oh, no.
And there was no power, and it was really cold, and they kept coming along telling us, look, we're sorting out another train. It's all going to be okay. And they were really good at communication. You couldn't fault them. So they got us all off the train and onto this platform in the middle of nowhere. And this old rattly train pulls in, and it's a Russian train that's making its way. It's not a tourist train. It's just an old Russian train.
Oh, dear.
So we get on that train for our last trip, our trip into Amsterdam. And all the staff that were looking after us came on board with us. And were wandering around making sure we're okay and giving us forms to fill in to get a refund, which I thought was unbelievable.
Yeah, wow.
So we've only been on the second train for half an hour, and he's helping us fill in a form to get our money back.
That's awesome. No, it wouldn't happen here.
Anyway, by this point, Charlie, who's normally perfect, he's got some sort of cold and he's sort of looking a bit sad and sorry for himself. And we finally get into Amsterdam, we get off the train and we're wandering back to where we think our hotel's going to be. And he realises he's left the bag that has all our money and our passports on the train.
Oh, no.
And, this is someone who never does things like that. And secretly, I was kind of happy. I'm like,
he's not perfect anymore.
He did something wrong, finally. So, we make our way back to the train as quickly as we can, and it's already locked up. There's nothing. There's nobody there. We're like, oh, God, what are we going to do? And I'm thinking, well, it's, not the worst. We could have to stay in Amsterdam for a bit longer while we get new passports. Worse things could happen. I wasn't really too upset.
Yeah.
We wander back to our hotel and we check in, and we're waiting in line to check in, and we look over and there is the train guard with our bag.
Oh,
and
no
he'd
way.
opened the bag and found our check-in information and delivered our passports and our money to the hotel.
No way.
Yes, way. So I guess my story is German trains are unbelievable.
They're the best service ever.
It really was. Like our train station, our hotel was very, very close to the train.
Still.
It's only a 5 or 7 minute walk or something. But the fact that he went to that trouble and didn't just dump it in lost property.
Exactly. Wow. That's amazing. Oh, that's funny.
Not a sad story, really. Just
a happy train story.
A happy train story. And the fact that Charlie's not perfect, which was a great travel story for me.
You've milked that?
I'm the one that gets to the airport and realises my passport's at home. So,
have you actually done that?
Yeah, once.
Oh, and was it retrievable?
We lived in Mascot, so it was. It's right near the airport in Sydney, so it really wasn't a big deal. But it was enough for him to be able to tease me, incessantly forever.
As far as losing your passport goes, this is the best way to have it happen, I think. When it turns up again nearly as soon as you've realised it's missing, that's the best way. But I particularly like that this meant Paula now can remind her husband, if necessary, that he was the one who lost their passports and money once. And that's quite important, I think. All right. Now, my next guest is Jen Williams, and she also had an incident with her passport and some other belongings while she was on a trip in Mongolia. And it proved to be a little bit more troublesome.
Basically, my experience in Mongolia, Mongolia is one of my favorite places that I travel to. And when I got there, I booked a couple tours. And on my first tour, which was a 15-day tour, I think it was the second day in, I got my bag and my passport stolen.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things where you can't do anything. The guides and the people on the tour were wonderful, but I couldn't do anything until I got back to Ulaanbaatar. And once I was back in Ulaanbaatar and get everything figured out, they made me extend my trip because it was going to take them longer to get my passport because it had to be shipped out to Beijing to get printed. So I had to extend my trip. I, conferred with the consulate and said, when can I have the end date? And so they said, okay, well, when did you arrive? Told them when I arrived. And I was like, okay, I'm going to confirm it. I confirmed it 3 times with them of my date. So I booked my flight and waited. And then before I got to, the day before I went to the airport, they gave me a letter that included all the information of why I have a temporary passport.
Right.
So I had a temporary passport and they, said, it was stolen, blah, blah, blah. And it was all done in Mongolian. So there was no problems. So I got to the airport and it was just one of those things where you get to the airport and nothing goes right. Because I get there early and I thought I had enough time, but I got in line and when I got up to the checkout or the check-in lady, she couldn't check me through to the whole way. So I was going to Thailand and then I had a stopover in Beijing, but she couldn't check me through all the way to Thailand. And so she's like, okay, well, just wait a minute. I have to get my manager and get him to fix. I'm like, okay. So being the polite Canadian, I just stand on the side. And I'm standing there for a long time because not only am I just waiting there, she's now helping every single person in line behind me.
Oh,
and I'm like, where is this manager? And so I'm now giving her the evil eye because I'm just like, hello.
Remember me.
Felt like setting up a flare. So she got the manager finally, and he just, did a couple things on the computer. She's like, oh, well, we can't do it. She'll just have to check in Beijing. Well, you could have done that in the first place. So now I get my ticket, go and get my bag scanned and everything. I'm one of the lucky ones where they rip my whole bag apart and, go through everything. And I'm just I'm running not late, but I usually like to arrive very early.
Yeah.
So it's getting time. And I was like, okay, well, get them to put everything back in my bag and shove everything in. And I'm in the lineup for the immigration. So I gave him my temporary passport, and then I saw him look at it. He typed it in and he looked at it, and then he looked at me, and I'm like, I have a letter. And I give him the letter. And so he's like, wait here. But he didn't even say wait here. Well, he probably said wait here, but that's the only English he knew. And so I was like, okay. So I was trying to explain to him why I have a temporary passport, because I just assumed that it was the temporary passport. So he told me I have to wait on the side, that someone else is coming to talk to me. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I did. And then there was another girl that was standing there as well. And I was like, do you know what's going on? And then the other immigration lady came over. And she just started talking in Mongolian. And I just stood there. I didn't know what the heck she was saying.
Because you don't exactly look like a local. So it's surprising she would assume you understood. But
you would have thought blonde hair would have given it away.
Yeah.
The girl, luckily, she knew the guy that I met at the consulate. And so she and I talked to each other. And she happened to speak Mongolian plus English. So she was translating for me what was going on. So basically, I overstayed my visa.
Oh,
and so
yes, but
I confirmed with the consulate 3 times. So I was like, okay, well, no. And they're like, yes, you overstayed by 1 day. And I'm like, okay. And so with the exchange of everything, they're like, we're going to charge you $100 American to leave. And I'm like, no. I'm just stubborn. Most people would just pay it, but I'm stubborn. I'm like, I am not paying that to leave the country. And,
it's not my fault.
Exactly. So then I got my phone out because I had the consulate number in my phone because I'd been calling them. So I click, 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 click. Get on the phone with my contact.
Help.
They're telling me I am overstayed and I'm being charged. And so the phone was passed back and forth between the immigration officer talking to the consulate, and then came back saying, nope, you're going to have to pay for it. I'm like, I'm not paying for it. And then she's like, get the phone to the consulate lady again. I'm like, okay. And so I don't know what happened, but it ended up where she's like, okay, you're just going to have to sign some papers and then they're going to let you go. I'm like, okay.
I wonder what you signed.
I signed some papers, and at this point, it took so long, I could hear them calling my name because the flight was leaving.
Yeah.
And thank God it is a very small airport, because even all the people were waiting by the door saying, where is she? Where is she? And they all know who I was. And so not only am I having to write everything out in this form, and then they're like, okay, you're done. Then I have to go back to immigration and go through immigration again to be able to get through onto the plane.
Oh, no.
And so I finally get over to my gate where I am. I couldn't believe that they held the plane because I was probably about 15 minutes over of where I was when the plane was due to leave. Mm-hmm. And then they took my bag and we just booked it right down. the plane.
Airport sprint.
The last person. Yeah, I've never been on the last person. You just see everyone staring at you because you're that person.
Again, all is well that ends well, but that was a frustrating way to leave Mongolia. My final guest today is Marina Villatora, and we are definitely covering plenty of continents today because this story takes place in Guatemala. Now, Marina had been travelling in Guatemala, in fact, intending to travel throughout South America. She had just met the man who would then become her husband, and her reason to actually live in Guatemala ever since. But this was the early days, and she had some travel fun, let's say, where it was more than just her passport that went missing.
Once I finally did that, I decided to stay in Guatemala for a while, at least because at this point I didn't really know. We just started this new relationship. But he was, back then, what he was doing was 3 weeks working in Arcus in this rehabilitation center. Mm-hmm. And then he had 1 week off. That was the 1 week he could travel with me. Right. So I had 3 weeks to be able to explore Guatemala and Honduras. So I explored other countries around there. So Guatemala is a really popular place called Lake Atitlan. Very pretty. And back then, that's where the majority of the classes, the Spanish classes were. I was on my way going there. And this is at this point, I've already been in Guatemala for like a month. So me and him have already really started our relationship. I wasn't sure where we're going, but it felt serious. So anyways, I went there on my own. I met this other guy while I was staying in another hostel. And he was like, I'm going to be there. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll go meet you there. And then I ended up meeting another girl. So we kind of, the three of us. And when so Atitlan is a very peculiar place. It's this crater, a volcanic crater that is now completely filled as a lake. And it is surrounded by these little towns. And it's very indigenous with a lot of the Maya. Then it has all these weird, crazy expats, like literally fugitives, like not the good kind of expats.
Oh, I see.
And then you've got like, so it's this really weird energy, right? But I didn't know that at this time. This is my first time going there. I wanted to go and spend so back then, again, this is 19 years ago, that there was nowhere to use credit cards. So I had to take out money because I was going to spend almost an entire month there. Oh, my husband-to-be was going to meet me there as well. So I knew I was going to stay there for at least a month, maybe 2 months.
Right.
So I just took all this money out. I knew that I couldn't use my credit cards. I get to, like, there's a main town, and the other towns you pretty much have to get to by boat. So I met my two friends there, and this guy, his name was Henrik. He's like, you know what? I just met this woman, and she's like, why don't you, we're about to go traveling. Why don't you and your friends homestead my house in this little tiny village? So we're like, okay. And I don't know if you speak to too many backpackers, but backpackers are really into what's their cheapest possible way for them to spend as little money as possible, even if they have the millions in the bank, right?
Absolutely.
So we were like, oh, cool, we don't have to spend any money. So anyways, the following day, we get to this little village. It's called San Marcos. So if you think the weirdness of what I told you before was weird, it gets even weirder in this particular town. Because then now you have all these new wave people. Like, if you don't have a yoga mat under your arm, you are not cool enough. So we get there, and they have this retreat center right when you get off the boat. It's called the Pyramids. I think it still exists. And then we get to this house. It's actually two little tiny houses that we're going to be house sitting. And so they gave us their house, right? We ended up taking the two little houses. I was going to stay in one house, and Henrik was going to, me and the girl were going to stay in one house because it was clean. So we get there, and this is now, I've been already traveling for like 5 months. And I felt like, okay, I could really relax. I met, like, I'm in love, everything's all hunky-dory. I left everything to go to eat dinner, everything, including my passport, all my money, everything. I felt that safe. Come back 2 hours later, and everything I owned was robbed.
Oh,
everything.
No.
Everything was robbed. So the thing is, it's a village that you could only get to by boat. It's now 7 p.m. There are no more boats. So now the whole farce began. It became like a total circus.
Your stuff is somewhere in that village still, basically.
I had to ask for help. It totally is. So I had to go to the police. But the police station was closed. First, there was 2 police people. They were telling me that it was my fault, that I robbed myself. It was completely ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. My Spanish was broken. So it was ridiculous. So I had to get some help, thinking that I was going to get some help. There was a hotel right in front of me. I go there. It's owned by this British woman. So it's morning because I got absolutely nowhere. And at this point, I have nothing. I don't even have underwear, right? I have absolutely nothing. And it costs $1.50 to get to the village. I didn't even have $1.50 to get me off the village. So finally, the next morning, and the police are total shock. They don't believe it, blah, blah, blah. So the next morning, I go to the police station again now to fill out a report. So there's this tiny little police guy taking my report with his total broken down typewriter, totally hitting on me and acting like this is the first time it's ever happened. Oh my God, we can't believe it. Takes, and then he feels bad for me. He gives me 100 quetzales, which is their money, which is like, I don't know, $12.
Okay.
So at this point I'm like, I'm devastated. I don't know what to do. Like when you're traveling backpack, it's literally your house that was just robbed, right?
Yes, everything you own at this point in time is gone.
Everything.
Yeah. Oh,
I took out $2,000 so that I was to, live
time there. Yes. Oh,
and I didn't even care that much about my credit cards because I knew there was nowhere to spend. Like today, you freaking go
quickly. Yeah.
You can't. There's nowhere to use it, right? So finally, I called my parents the next day. They Western Union me my money. So I had to go wait for it, but it took 24 hours. Meanwhile, I go to a restaurant to get coffee. And of course, at this point, everybody knows my story. And this guy comes up to me. He's like, I'm really sorry. This happened to you. It happened to 4 other people last night, too. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm like the cop. I was just with the cop. Like, he acted like none of this ever happened.
Oh, no.
Not only that, so it's a guy. He's not only known, he lived right across the street from where I am. He has been robbing everybody. Everybody's dead scared of him. The 4 other people also got robbed. They had to leave because they were flying out, but they couldn't because he robbed all of their passports, like mine. Gosh. So all of this is a huge mess, right? So I couldn't even find them for us to kind of, and they went. But he took out a machete on them. So I was freaking out, and I still had to spend the night there. I'm like, I feel more freaked out here than I did in Manhattan at 3 a.m.
Fair enough.
So I was totally stuck there. The girl that I was with lent me money to go and get my Western Union thing. We get to a Western Union thing, and of course it's closed because it's a Sunday. So I had to go back. But meantime, while I'm waiting in this little village, I meet this woman. She's like in her 40s. I was in my late 20s. And she was, I was devastated. I was telling her the story. She's also from the same area. She's like, you know what? I have some extra clothes that I could give you. She's like, come by tomorrow in the morning and I'll give them to you. So me and this girl, the girl that I was traveling with, her name was Janka, I think. I don't know. She was from Holland. So me and her go by the directions that this woman gave us. The direction was get to the lake, follow the little road. There's no cars, absolutely no cars at all. So it's all footpath. Right. Go to the path where people jump off. There's like this waterfall. Make a right and go all the way up. So we get to this like cliff waterfall where people are obviously jumping off, and we look up and it's like this house really far up and there is no footpath. So me and Janka were like, is this for real? Like, what's going on? Took us like an hour to get there, finally get there to this house. And it's like an architectural digest mansion.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what? We get to her house, like this beautiful home, no way to get to her house except for like this really rocky way. And all of a sudden she takes us to this room where it is like as if though you walked into like a Broadway theater production full of costumes. And it was like out of a story. Me and Janka were like, what is going on with us? Like, where are we? And how did this happen? And then all the clothes that she gave me were like Gucci, Calvin Klein,
wow.
Ann Taylor. I was just like, Donna Karan, and we're like, who is this human? It was just the most bizarre thing that ever happened.
Fortunately, this chain of events didn't put Marina off Guatemala or her Guatemalan husband-to-be, and she's still happily there, I think nearly 2 decades later. So not a great start, but we can recover from these things. So that is important. Now, I hope that even though if you're listening to this, as it comes out, you are probably also not using your passport, I hope you know where it is. Make sure you do. Don't be silly and lose it like mine, and hopefully you don't have any of these things happen to you where it disappears unwillingly either. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to these tales and to episode 196 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A big thank you, as always, to my guests. First up, I chatted with Paula Morgan from the Sydney Expert site, and you can read more about Sydney from Paula at sydneyexpert.com. Thank you also to Jen Williams of Launch Your Travels, and Jen's site is launchyourtravels.com. And lastly, thank you very much to Marina Villatora, and she has a website called The Trader Chick, and you can find her at thetraderchick.com. Now, if you have not yet joined the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers, I have a special request. If you've been thinking about it and never quite get around to it, do it now. So it is coming up to episode 200 in just a few weeks, and I would love to celebrate episode 200 with 1,000 members of the Thoughtful Travellers group. We're at something like close to 980, I think. So come along and search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook or click through the link in the show notes. The show notes for this episode are at notaballerina.com/196. As always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.